Okay, great. I am going to begin. Okay, I think that should show it. Let me maximize it. Technology. All right, let me put this full screen. Okay, so this presentation is called 10 Reasons You're Still Struggling with Stress. This is something that I am really passionate about as a burnout recovery coach. And I'll explain a little bit more about me in just a moment. And then we're going to jump straight in. So my name is Andre Bright. I'm from Sierra Leone, currently living in London. And I'm a executive coach. I'm qualified with the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, and the AOEC, the Academy of Executive Coaches. I'm also an architect and a dancer. And this is significant because those are three completely different career paths all in one. And I've had moments where that has been the cause of some of my burnout. And so what I'm going to be sharing today is some of the experiences I've had, what I've come up with as a solution to getting yourself out of a position of stress and burnout, but then also how to maintain it, right? And so I built it into a framework. It's something I find frameworks really help me to remember where I am and what I need to do. So I used to struggle with the need to be acknowledged. So I realized that I needed to do everything. I needed for people to see that I was doing everything. And it's something I thought was just a quality trait at the beginning, but I realized later on that actually this was something a little bit deeper. I had a bit of a savior complex. If someone was in trouble, I needed to be the person to help them. It was my initial reaction. It was my reflex, should we say, was to step in. And it often left me in a state where I was expending a lot more than I actually had to give. And sometimes they say you got to pour out of your overflow as opposed to your actual cup. I was pouring out of my cup to the point where I would run out of cups and start looking for other cups to fill just to give to other people. And I was not giving it to myself the way I was giving it to other people. And it's possible that some of you in here might be experiencing that as well. I had what I call the Superman syndrome. I thought I could do everything all at the same time. The first time I came out of my coaching qualification, I had a campaign really, which was called I Can Do Everything. I can do anything, not everything. And the idea is that individually I can do all things, but not together, because that's where it becomes overwhelming. And then there's the multi-hyphenacy, which is a word I just made up, but it's the idea of being multiple things at the same time. And that was me, and that's where I'm at. So that's a little bit of background on myself. Could we just in the chats, if you can just put a little number, if put a number one, if you can relate to any of the stuff I mentioned so far about that idea of needing to be there for people, pouring out of like whatever cup you've got left, feeling like you need to be everything to everyone, those kind of things. Just give me a little one in the chats for that. Thank you for that. So today in this webinar, we're just going to go through a few elements of this. So I'm going to give a little bit of a background into how stress works because it's something that you may be aware of already, but not everyone is. So I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page with that first. And then we're going to go into the 10 reasons. And that 10 reasons was from a survey that I conducted. And it's basically the top 10 reasons why people thought they were struggling with stress. And then we're going to go into the root causes of that, why those things exist. And then we're going to go into the relief framework that I developed. And then we're going to go into stress mastery, which is something I've put together to help if you're in a state where those root causes are something that you're affected by. And then we'll have a space at the end of that for some Q&As, because if there's any questions and things that I can help with, then that'll be the time for it. We're capping this session at an hour. So we've got about 50 minutes, 50, until the end, but the actual presentation itself shouldn't be that long. It maybe be about 20 minutes or so. And then we'll give enough time for any questions afterwards. As we're going, if there's any questions, just put them in the chat. And then when I come out of the presentation, I'll jump into there and answer them with you. So the first part is, what is stress? So one of the main things to consider is that there are internal and external elements of it. The internal ones are what we call the stress. It's the way you think, your belief systems, your emotions, and the sensations that you feel in your body. So it's hormones that are happening within your body as a result of the stressors, which are external. It's the circumstances, it's the workplace, the people, the global issues, things that might cause triggers for you. So those are the two elements of stress to pay attention to. The reason why this is significant is that when we're looking at cycles of stress that lead us towards burnout, often we deal with one and not the other. Sometimes we might deal with a stressor and take ourselves into a new environment. We might leave our job and go and find somewhere else or move countries. But if there's something internal in terms of the way we think and the way we behave, for example, that is also causing us the stress, then moving the environment isn't actually going to help. And then some people deal with the stress. We're like, okay, cool. So let me make sure I've got my breathing techniques and I've got my self-care practices. And I want to make sure that I'm thinking of myself and treating myself well. But then there's only so much you can do if your environment is toxic. So the idea about the stress and stressor is dealing with both of them, right? And by doing that, you end up at a space where you're able to maintain a manageable amount of stress, because stress itself isn't a negative thing. Stress is actually there for a purpose. It rushes us with energy to be able to act. And you must have heard about the fight or flight or freeze response is there for a purpose, right? So when we are under a deadline, we go into zone of influence, right? Zone of action. We're triggered. We're going into it. We're able to do all these things that we haven't been able to do for months, that kind of thing. That's what stress is for. There's also another thing to think about when it comes to stress, which I have to say at this point, because it's something I've seen a lot by doing my material online, but also helping people through it, is the difference between the symptom and cause. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is that with the global conversation around stress, a lot of it is focused towards the symptoms. It's what you see, what you feel. So it's your physical manifestation, your physical changes. You might gain or lose weight. You might have headaches. You might find yourself lower back pains and all that kind of stuff, or maybe have chronic conditions that might come up. You might have mental symptoms or forgetfulness, things like that. You start not being sharp and hazy, memory loss, things like that. You might have emotional change where you start feeling really triggered all the time or not feel anything at all with things that you usually care about. You lose your motivation, that kind of thing, or behavioral change. The example I often give is that if your glass of wine turns into a bottle at the end of the day, you start to go to negative coping mechanisms, or you start to snap at the people around you that you love. Those are the things that are usually talked about in the conversation around stress and burnout, but those are just the symptoms. The issue and we'll go to it in a minute, about what keeps us within this loop, which is why you're maybe still struggling with stress, is that we don't deal with the causes, and the causes we'll go through in a minute. So I want to stop there just before we go any further. I'm going to do a quick exercise in a minute, which is looking at why you feel you're still struggling with stress. But a quick one. I know we've in the chat. Thank you. Welcome, Christy. Welcome, Sam. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. Awesome to see you all here. And Charlie, Latoya, Io, Pamela, you all hit the ones. Thank you. Appreciate that. Like, a question I have for you right quick as I set up the whiteboard is, what is there anything that has come up so far that you've learned? Hit me a 2 if there has been anything so far that you're like, okay, that is interesting. I maybe never considered it before, or this is something that I've learned today. Just hit me with a 2 if that is you, and I will set up the next whiteboard. So this is where you realize me and technology are not best of friends. Okay, cool. So some of the twos are coming through. I appreciate that as well. Thank you for your interaction. Um, yeah, exactly right. So in a moment, we're going to go through a little bit because it would be good to see what those things are. But before we do, I'm just going to open up this whiteboard now. I'm going to give this whiteboard exercise. Thanks for that, Platine. Thanks, Sam. So for those of you who aren't familiar with whiteboards and how they work, you have a screen in front of you and you should be able to. I know for mine on the side, I have a little option buttons on the left. It might be at the top or bottom for you, depending on if it's on a laptop or phone. Um, what I can do is I can click the text button and I can click anywhere on screen and I can write something which allows me to see everyone to see. So everyone has the ability to do that. So what I would like before we go on to the next part is to just answer that question. Why are you still struggling with stress? And this could be, you can put as many of them as you want and just give a few minutes just to think about that question and write what they are down. Some of mine I've put before. So I had my Superman syndrome, right? So that meant that every time something happened, I felt like I could do everything, right? So I'm just going to give you a few minutes if you can. Just write as much as possible anywhere on screen. I create space in my schedule and then fill it up again. Absolutely. Yeah. I had an image recently about that, about being on the beach. I went to Clacton-on-Sea and made sandcastles, which was one of my things to help me with my, wellness and everything. And where I built the sandcastle was deep within the line of the water. And I did all this effort, and then the water just came in and washed it all away, and I had to start again from scratch. And it can feel like that sometimes, right? You do all this effort and then it just gets washed away. I sometimes operate from a place of performance rather than grace. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, thinking that I need to be the one who always supports. Absolutely. I link my worth to my productivity. That's a huge one. And I think definitely in the West, particularly in this capitalist society that we're in, that is definitely a common one. I put others first, absolutely. One thing that I always go back to is the idea of when you're in an airplane, the air hostesses and hosts say, in the event of emergency, the oxygen is going to come down and we want you to put the mask on the whoever's next to you first. They don't, right? They usually say they're going to put it on, you need to put it on yourself first so that you're able to help others. And so when we put others first, we actually end up counterintuitively not being able to meet their need because we burn out anyway. I find it hard to tune into my needs and express them. Absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a little minute as well. I care about my job, so I give it and give it and give to it. Absolutely. I hear that. I hear that. Superwoman syndrome. Absolutely, Christy. 100%. These are all great. I really appreciate you engaging in this because it's good to actually see what these things are for you, like why you're still struggling with stress and what is keeping us there, what is keeping us within this cycle. Because sometimes we can find ourselves confused as to why we're still here. We know what to do in theory, but for some reason we still find ourselves there. So thank you so much for that. What I will do is I will close this down. I'm going to give you one more minute just to add if there's anything else you want to add, and then I'll close it down and go back to the presentation. So if there's anything like last that you want to add, then this is your time. I see a lot of activity on screen. This is great. I want to be perfect. That's a big one. Perfectionism. I've been talking a lot about that recently, actually, on the social media, because and we're gonna come into that in the next few slides, I think, as well. So thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for being so honest as well, everyone, because I know sometimes in a space like this, you're like, oh, can I share? Can I be honest? But it's really good for me and good for you actually to be able to identify these things. I'm just going to drag this one up a little bit so I can see it. I can sometimes feel like I'm not fully allowed to take time off based on the stage I'm at. Yeah, that's a really, really good point, actually. Um, and that idea of permission is something that came up in one of my polls that I did recently as well, is who gives that permission? And how do we get to a stage where we're able to give ourselves the permission? You know, how do we elevate ourselves to that stage where we're able to give ourselves permission and listen to it? I'm at my entrepreneurship journey. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, great. Let me see if I create space to fill up again. Link product. I care about my job. Yeah, I think I've got everything in there. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone. And I appreciate that. I'm gonna add. I'm gonna go back to the presentation now, just quickly, just to get onto the next couple of slides here. And long story short, I did a poll, and the question was, what are the reasons why you're still struggling with stress? And these are the top 10 that came back. And I'm going to read them out for you because some of them had a little bit of background to them. So, lack of time. So, they felt like they didn't have the time to put in the practices that were needed to keep them out of stress. They felt like put in wellness days and all that kind of stuff were things that would add to their already busy schedule. Overwhelming responsibilities. This one came up a few times actually with the idea that they had to do certain things, they had particular roles, and they couldn't not do those things, but there were too many of them to be able to handle. And so no matter what they did, they kept finding themselves back there. Poor work-life balance. This is something that I found to be a recurring theme that I'm actually fighting against at the moment. I prefer work, rest, play balance. I think when we say work-life balance, we put work and life at the same level, which is often part of the problem. Fear of being seen as incapable or weak. So they don't want to ask for help because it's like, oh, what does that mean about me? I'm always the person who's strong and all this kind of stuff. And so they think that they have to seem like they're able to do with everything. Personal issues. This is something that might be happening behind the scenes. This is more like the emotional stuff. Are you going through a breakup? Is there stuff that's happening in your home country? Is there people you're supporting or news you've just received? Or is there like a condition that you're experiencing physically, mentally, emotionally, that you're having on top of everything the self that might be chronic? One of the things that I found interesting was this one here, normalizing chronic stress. So someone has been experiencing this for so long, they think it's normal. So what came up here is that I'd asked someone, what out of 1 to 10, how do you feel right now? And they said, oh, about a 6. But this was in reverse. So 10 was the level of stress. So extreme stress is 10, right? And so they said, oh, I'm at a 6. And I asked, oh, you know, what do you do to get down to one of the lower numbers? And they were like, what do you mean? And I said, how do you get down to a 2, for example? And they said, I don't, I'm never at 2. And I was like, oh, maybe we can start there, because if you can't remember the last time you weren't stressed, maybe there's something behind that that we can work on, right? We mentioned before perfectionism earlier on, high expectations, and especially unrealistic ones. Like we mentioned Superman and Superwoman syndrome, for example, the idea that you have to and you can do everything. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes we need help. Sometimes we need to spread that load a little bit. Teams are there for that reason. We have partners, we have friends, that kind of thing. Trapped in roles. Now, this one was interesting because initially I thought people were talking about the overwhelming responsibilities, and they're kind of linked, but it was the idea that they have certain roles in other people's lives or other institutions. I am the manager, so I am responsible for everybody. Or I am a parent, and so I'm responsible for the children. I am the husband, so I am responsible for the family or the wife, or all those kind of things. They felt trapped in those roles, which meant that they couldn't get out of them to be able to feel that relief of stress. which meant that there was a whole different kind of approach to that, as how do you manage it from within that role? How can you relieve yourself of stress within that role? And then there's misalignment of values. Now, this one is going to come up a little bit later because and I put this one last because this is something that I've realized is a core to many people's issues, is especially if you're in the workplace, for example. I'll give you an example. If family is a value, but you're working nights, then you'll end up compromising your what is of value to you. You don't get to spend time with your family. You don't get to be present when you do because you're tired or you're thinking about all the X, Y, and Z you need to do at work the next day. And so you find yourself in a situation where you're constantly running or can't align with the values. And what happens when you're in misalignment of your values is you feel stress. And what can happen, and I don't want to turn this into like a coaching session, but what can happen if you're living in a life that is misaligned with your values is that you can grow resentment to what is causing the misalignment, which might be your conditions, your environment, the people in your network, for example, or resentment towards yourself for allowing these misalignments to occur. So all these kind of things are the deeper reasons behind what we're talking about. And it's really important to be aware of those. Now, obviously, I'm a coach, so I help people through these kind of things, and we'll come to that a little bit later. But it's important to think to yourself when you're answering questions like we asked in the whiteboard before, where we're thinking about why are we still struggling with stress, try and think behind the initial reason. Try and get down to the core and see if there's anything there that you need to work on. Is it so for example, some of these might be fear of I don't know, fear of, say for example, for me, for example, it was an idea of worth. I need to prove myself here to be perceived as valuable. And if that is the case, then where is that idea coming from, right? So just bearing in mind that behind all of these is a root cause. And I would encourage you all to actually explore what those might be. All right. And the way to do that is with what I call the 5 whys. And if there's anything that you take away from today, I would encourage it to be this. This is a technique that it's not mine. I cannot claim it, unfortunately, but it is an exercise that I use in a situation like this to get down to the root cause. The idea is that you say, okay, I am feeling overwhelmed. Why? Because I have too much work on my plate. Why? Because I have accepted too much work. Why? Because I feel the need to be productive because I'm going towards this financial goal or role or what's it called? Promotion. Why? Because I need to provide, or I see myself as this kind of person within the family. Why? Because I feel like I need to have these things in order for me to be able to look after my family or friends. And if I don't, I'll feel insignificant or I won't be able to fill my role as a family, right? So you keep going. Now, one of the things about the 5 whys, five really is an arbitrary number. So you might find that you get down to the root cause before or after that number 5. But the main idea is to keep asking yourself that question until you can't go any deeper. So for example, in that case, it might be a situation where you have an idea that a man, for example, has to have certain roles in place, which means that I'm continuously doing stuff to feed this idea. And until I can separate myself from that idea, I will always find myself burning out because I'm always going to pile things on my plate to look busy, to be able to be productive, because that's where I feel like my value is. I think someone said earlier on, I place my value on my productivity. That could be one of them, right? So the 5 whys might undisclose where that idea came from, right? So does that make sense to anyone in terms of the 5 whys? If it does, give me a number 3 in the chats. And I'll be curious to see if anyone was to test this out, what they would actually come up with as the root cause of some of the reasons why we found ourselves still struggling with stress, right? Thank you, Latoya, for being honest. Thank you, Ayo. Um, for me, I did this exercise a few times through my life, and I find myself surprised by the answer actually. And it was a bit of a therapy session, to be honest with you. But once I did find what was behind a lot of my behavior, I could actually change it. You know, I could reframe my mind. I could reshape the stories that I've been telling myself. I could supply myself with different evidence so that my behavior would change as a result. All right. So as we said before, we looked at where the symptoms were, but the causes we start to realize might be something a little bit deeper. Like we've all seen the idea of the iceberg theory, where maybe 20% of it is above ground and 80% is below water, sorry. The symptoms are only the tip of the iceberg. The causes are the real roots, right? And like I said, that could be the environment if it's toxic. It could be your level of resilience, how fast you're able to bounce back, and how you view things. It might be your self-perception. Am I worthy of this? Do I need to keep earning my place within these spaces? Or is it fear? Fear of abandonment, fear of loss in some kind of way? You know, do I feel like I need this job because that is where my value lies? All these kind of things. So it's good to keep in mind, and thank you, Charlie, again, of not just the symptoms, but the causes, not just the stress, but the stressors, right? And use the 5 whys to come down to the root of all of that. Okay, cool. So another quick exercise is, what would stress mastery mean for you? So I'm gonna jump back into a whiteboard, and sorry, this is where is my whiteboard? There it is. So brilliant. So the question is, what would stress mastery mean to you? And what I mean by stress mastery, which is something we'll come up to in a moment, is what would it look like if you were able to manage stress and the stressors? What would that look like? What would be the result? Would it mean that you'd be able to handle the storm? And then what would that get you? Would you be able to um, handle more difficult situations better? Would you be able to handle that difficult person at work? Would you be able to speak up and defend yourself and the people around you? Would you be able to take time off and feel refreshed? Would you be rejuvenated with your workspace? Would you be able to feel more motivated in your work? What would that look like to you? What would stress mastery mean? Great. We had my mind being a lot more free, 100%. Let me see if I can move this down. Rest and enjoy life without guilt. That's a big one, because I find one of the things that ends up happening is there is genuine guilt for things like taking time off. So it's like, okay, I can't take time off, or I can't have time for myself because there's so many people who rely on me, for example. All right, better health. My stress causes me a lot of physical problems. Absolutely. Yeah. So better health, physical, mental, emotional, being able to be at that stage, not to be shaken by the stressful times. Absolutely. One of the things that was interesting, and I did a talk about this before, was the idea of resilience and how you can have a workplace and the environment is the same, but people react to certain pressures differently. And part of it might be due to the stress and the stressors, like how we're built internally. But often some of us are just able to bounce back faster than others. You know, more leisure time, absolutely. And I think that's important. That's one of the reasons why I say, instead of work-life balance, I use work, rest, play balance, because leisure time for me comes under play. And remember, if you're trying to find trying to add anything on screen, you can go to the text box, which might be towards the left, up, or down of your screen, and then you'll be able to add something in there. More relaxed, more mindful, 100%, 100%. And that's an important one as well, being mindful, being present in the moments, because one of the things as well is not being able to switch off. What's the use of having going on a holiday if you're constantly thinking about work and your deadlines? What is the point of taking your children to the park if you're not able to be present with them and you're not even realizing they're asking you questions in that moment? So it's important to be able to be mindful and present. We've got one here, is my mind being a lot more free from what others may feel about my boundary. Woo, that's a good one. Yeah, and doing it without, again, connecting that to without guilt. This is a boundary and this is what I need. And so if you don't feel a certain way about my boundary, that's not my concern. Being able to do that instead of being like, oh, that makes them feel a certain way. So let me get rid of my boundary and appease them, which can end up finding yourself back in that role again. Rest and enjoy life without guilt, we mentioned. Better health, we mentioned. Not to be shaken, we mentioned. More relaxed, more confidence, 100%. Being able to walk into those spaces and deal with things that need to be dealt with. And one of the things that I haven't mentioned so far is often stress builds up when things aren't dealt with. So often it's the anticipation of an outcome that can build a lot of stress as well. So thank you so much for these. And it's great to see some of these on screen as well, because I've definitely experienced pretty much all of these at some time of my life. Um, Brilliant. Thank you. And welcome, Kemi. Thank you for being here. Yes, Elizabeth, pleasure. Portia, welcome. And thanks for staying here as well, Sam, Christy, Latoya, Pamela, Charlie, Millie in the house, Ayo. Absolute pleasure to have you here. One last thing that we're going to bring in here is what we do about that. So, like I mentioned, my name is Andre Bright. I'm a burnout recovery coach. And so the idea is that I will help you through the recovery of this. So you'd have someone who's a prevention coach, and I do that as well. The idea of what kind of systems and what kind of habits and routines can you put into your place to avoid you getting into burnout. But I generally work with people who are experiencing stress already and help them to get out of that, right? So I'm going to share something with you right now, which is how I do that. And I'm going to share it with you because, yes, there is hold on a second, technology. Okay, I think this is the best way to do it. So, gotta stop sharing that. Sorry, bear with me slightly. While I do this. Okay, cool. I think that's it. Thank you for your patience. So, can you all see this? There should be a screen in front which says 10 reasons you're struggling to master stress. Can you see it? Just give a thumbs up or something. Okay, perfect. Brilliant. So, so I'm going to show you how I do this. Out of those 10, you had lack of time. And one of the things that I do is help you integrate stress management into the daily routines. Normalizing chronic stress, and this is more about reframing your mindset. So you can recognize what your mindset is doing to help put you in that place of stress. In terms of overwhelming responsibilities, is really more about strategies of priorities, how to delegate tasks. This is more tactical stuff, and some people do need this. So whether it's at work, how to prioritize, how to manage your day, your time, that kind of thing. In terms of high expectations, is looking at what those goals are, where those expectations came from, and embracing the idea of imperfection. And it's a funny one, this one, because I think I suffered from this a little bit, because what I realized is that nobody's perfect. It's something that we all know in theory, but then we create this idea of ourselves, which is perfect, which means that we're actually setting ourselves up for failure. And because we're trying to become this idea that we'll never attain, we consistently fall behind it. And then we beat ourselves up for not reaching that unrealistic goal for ourselves. And so the idea is like reframing that and looking at it and saying, okay, cool, what part of this can we actually attain? We're not going to be 10 all the way through all the time. So I help you with that. In terms of the work-life balance, it's about boundaries that were mentioned before. Like I mentioned, my work, rest, play. And also when it comes to lack of support, this is not something that someone has mentioned so far, but who's in your network to help you? Do you have personal and professional support systems? So we'll look at that and we'll establish who is around you, what's your community like that helps you manage your stress. And then we mentioned about the fear of being seen as weak. This is looking at resilience, really, and looking at it as a strength, not a weakness, in terms of how to manage it, being able to actually ask for help. Feeling trapped in your roles is looking at exploring what options you actually have, whether it's improving your situation or making strategic moves. And then we're looking at unresolved personal issues. So this is looking at holistic approaches. So your mind, your body, your spirit, your friendship circles, that kind of thing. And your misalignment of values, which I mentioned being important, which is looking at adjustments we can make to fulfillment and reduce stress. And I do that with stress mastery, which is a framework that I've created, which has helped me and it will help you. So there's 6 elements of it, and there's 3 pillars. I'm not going to go into them today, but I'm just going to really briefly give you a heads up as to things that you want to be considering. If you're consistently finding yourself in a place of stress, it's worth thinking about each of these 6. And you don't worry, you don't have to take notes. I'm going to be sending you all of this anyway. But number 1 is R for resilient mindset. So this is the physical, mental, and emotional resilience. How fast can you bounce back when things happen? I think someone mentioned that in one of the whiteboard sessions earlier on. Number 2 is efficient stress management. This is immediate relief. So if something happens that is stressful, what tools, what systems do I have in my body? What can I do right now, which is going to relieve me of that stress? Versus L, which is lifestyle optimization. What can I do for long-term solutions, right? So those 3 are the main 3 pillars, but the rest of the 3 are I for inner alignment, and that is looking at your core values and purpose and really reflecting on that and being able to build yourself out something that works for you. E is emotional mastery. So this is regulation. How do you manage stress? This is going back to the resilience we mentioned earlier. And the idea that, if something happens, it doesn't crush you. Something can happen, but we can still remain functional. Sometimes that's healthy, sometimes it's not. But how can we manage our emotions so that we can deal with things as and when they come? And the last thing is focus action, because all of this is useless without action. What can we actually put into place in our daily life, in our monthly life, for example, which will allow us to remain sustainably free from stress, right? And one of the reasons why this is important is because sometimes we need help to do that. Sometimes the first step is looking at who's in our network who can help us to build okay, cool. Once a month, I'm going to have an Andre day. And I need everyone to know that on Andre day, you can't contact me. Okay. And that might sound great for me, but I'm going to need my friends to confirm what those Andre days are and make sure they don't see me out helping somebody on that day or answering my phone on that day. Like, all these kind of things. They are just as much in it as with me. So to say that, okay, cool, you said you're going to have a day off. Have you? you know? And so those are the kind of things that you want to be thinking about. So if anything, 1 is the 5 whys, and 2 is the pillars of stress mastery, which is relief framework, right? RELIEF. Okay. And one of the things that I want to do is at this point, you could take this away and you can use that into your lifestyle, right? And you can action this today. I've given you enough for you to be able to say, okay, cool, this can actually work for me. But what I wanted to do is for those of you who have been struggling for maybe you've been struggling for months, years with these kind of issues, and you actually need help with it. I'm offering a 3-month transformational program, and this is called Stress Mastery. And the idea with these 3 months is over the next 90 days, it starts in September, October, November, basically, that I will work with a maximum of 8 people to help us through. Because it's one thing knowing them, it's another thing to be accountable enough to actually put them into place. But then there's obviously things behind it as well that can actually make it work. The idea is not just making it easy to do, but making it difficult not to do. That's where you want to be. You want to be at the stage where whatever happens, you've got things in place such that whatever happens, you will be able to bounce back all the time. So what I've put together is a package. And I thought to myself, for me personally, this is something I wish existed, right? So it starts with an assessment, which is a 1.5 hour in-depth consultation where we basically go through where you are, what you've experienced, what your triggers are. And by that, you'll be able to have an action plan that I'll put together for you. Then for the next 90 days, we'll have weekly one-to-one sessions with me directly, which was going to be talking about not just the theory, but the practice. We're going to be looking deep into the triggers, stress management techniques. Some of it is going to be teaching, but mainly is going to be coaching. It's going to be digging deep into you to find out what are those core things that keep getting you back into a state of stress, and what can we do to get you out of there. Monthly, as a group, we're going to meet up to do workshops. So we've been having these one-to-one sessions. What are the things that we're all challenging with still, right? What is the work-life integration? The idea, how are we integrating work into life as opposed to making it at the same balance, right? How are the most emotional resilience tactics going, etc. I'm going to build a personalized development plan for you as well. And then you're going to give access to online resources, which are basically on-demand training. So a lot of the stuff that I've spoken to you about, you can read about. This is hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of of reading and training and courses that I've taken that has got me to the stage where I was able to build this framework, which helps. But to shortcut, I will be giving you all of that, right, in just a series of online videos that you can download. But on top of that, one of the things that I realized which is really important is having accountability. And so there is also a private community that is involved as well. So there's only going to be 8 people for this, but there is an extended community for anyone who ever does any of the courses. And we're all just going to be supporting each other because it's difficult to do it alone. And sometimes some of you might have realized that you don't want to speak to your partner, or you don't want to speak to your friend, because you might feel like you're burdening them. You might feel like, they may not understand you. So this community is people who are going through what you're going through, who can support each other. There's also extended access. So the program itself is 3 months, but for 6 months after that, you still have access to it, which is one of the reasons why I don't really offer individual sessions anymore. I only do programs because you can do a lot in a session. I can give you a lot of the details, but life is going to happen. And tomorrow, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next month. And so the idea is, as and when life throws things at you, I want to be here to be able to help. And then there's a digital journal, which is something for you to be able to track your progress. Because one of the things is, because it's not tangible in that sense, it's not like it's money in the bank. Okay, I have 500 now, I have 600, right? But a journal, which is something I've designed, which has daily prompts, it has trackers which track the stress. So you can see on average, I found myself, instead of being at a 4, I'm on average at a 6 or 7. I'm able to feel that difference now. I'm feeling more purposeful. I'm having more energy in my life, that kind of thing. And then there's a health and stress guide. And for future, there's also a VIP day discount. And one of the things is to bring people together, to have a day where we meet each other in person and we actually have some fun. Fun is joy, shall I say, is one of the key components of burnout recovery that I found that we often lose sight of the older we get. And just finally, just to remind you of who I am, I'm your executive coach, your burnout coach, as my handles are. And I've been through this before, which is why I've put so much effort into creating something that would work. Like I said, I'm qualified by the ICF and the AOEC. And just to remind you, in terms of this package, this is what you get. And you'll notice it has all the values on the side. This is what you'd get if you were to get them all individually. And you don't have to believe me. You can go online, you can see what these things generally cost if you were to pay for them separately. But the overall value would be 5,210. But I don't want you paying that because for me, I feel like, first of all, there's three things. Number one, the people who are on this call right now, I most of you I know, right? I've seen you online or LinkedIn or somewhere before, but then also for you to be part of my program, you'll be effectively a founder because this is the first time I've delivered it like this. I've worked with people one-to-one. I've, helped people through it, and I was case one, right? But this will be my first time putting it in a group. So it gives me an opportunity to test these things out to get those results, which means that I can put everything into it. And because of that, I want to give you something great. And there's also a love it or leave it guarantee. The idea is that after the first month of one-to-ones and one group session, if you're not completely blown away by me as a coach, by the resources, by all of that, then you can cancel the rest of it and get prorated refund on the unused sessions, right? But there's also a 20% referral discount. So if you bring anyone else onto the program, and all it is going to be is that you send them this link that I'll show you in a minute, which is for this website, then you get 20% off as a referral, which means that if you get 5 people, you get the program for free, right? Um, so for a limited time, which is going to be for the next 2 weeks, it's going to be 2,500. So that's over 50% off. And this means that you're going to be able to have access to everything for that period of time. For 3 months, you'll have me, one-to-ones, all those things I said before. But on top of that, and I think this is one that I'm just doing as an offer until Friday, 1 p.m., is that there's also a 30% early bird discount that I'm also giving, right? Which means that instead of it being 2,500, it comes down to 1,750, right? And so one thing that I would want to ask you at this point is, first of all, what is the experience of stress that you've had so far? Has it been to that level of debilitation? Like what have you experienced as a result? Some of you may have had physical ailments, mental issues, emotional burnout, right? And think to yourself, what is the value of this to be able to work on that with somebody who's a trained professional? That's one thing I would want you to think about as you go through that. So I wanted to give you an opportunity as a Q&A. Let me see in the chats. If there's any questions, this is your time. I do have a me day, but I feel guilty letting people know. Absolutely. I completely understand that. I completely understand that, Pamela. I'm just going to add the link here for everyone to see. 1 second. So this is, you'll see from the link, it's got a coupon attached to that. That's the extra 30% off at the end of that. So if you're to look on it after Friday, 1 p.m., that will go back to the 2,500. So there's only 8 spaces. And the reason why I'm doing that is because with 8 people, I can actually give the attention you need because stress is no joke. If you're on this call, you know that stress is no joke. Stress can change the way you see the world. It can change the way you feel. And it can be in a situation where even when there's nothing going on, you can still feel like you're in danger. You still feel like there's a threat. Then it still it can be contagious in that sense as well. So I'm going to open it up to the floor. I know I've given you a lot of information over the last time, but are there any questions or thoughts? You can either put them in the chat or take yourself off mute to ask. I'll give you a few minutes. If you don't have any questions, it might be worth going into the link and having oh, yes, I do have payment plans. Thank you for the question, Ayo. If I go back to the website, 1 second, please. Okay, cool. So here you'll see that you have pricing options on the website, right? So the first one here is having a one-time payment of 2,500, and there is also a pricing option of 3 payments of 950, right? And so one of the things to mention with that is that means that by the end of it, you you will be paying your last payment at the end of the program, right? And you'll see here there's only 8 spaces here. So that's just something to keep in mind. There is also here lifetime access to the paid community that you can add on as a bump offer. And this is completely optional. You don't have to. But basically what that means is that community that I mentioned, that support group, it means that you would have access to them forever. So a year from now, 8 years from now, you still have access to that group, being able to say, hey, listen, folks, I'm still struggling with this thing. How do you come out of it? You know, what do you do to help? Or I just need someone to talk to. All of that kind of stuff, you have access to it for a year. All you have to do is click that button, and all of that is updated. I hope that answers the question. Any more questions? Again, you can put it into the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the question. You're welcome, Ayo. If you don't have any questions, I'm going to share this one last time and just show you the questions that I usually get. So at the bottom, you'd have a list of questions here with some responses, right? I don't have the time to commit. In terms of this, it is done at your leisure. So one of the next steps is that after this session, we'll do the consultation, like I mentioned. And then when you're booking the sessions, you book the 12 up to a time that works for you. So it doesn't have to be the same day every week. It doesn't have to be, it can be basically built around you. And if there's any reason why you can't make a specific session, then you can just change it, right? As long as it's 24 hours ahead of time. I'm not sure if this program will work for me, which is valid. One of the things for me is that, again, if after the first month you're not seeing anything happen with you, then you can cancel the rest of the session. And then what you would have had is you would have had 4 one-to-one sessions with an executive coach, and you would have had a group session. But I'm pretty confident you'll be able to feel the change. Like, one of the things I've realized is there's a lot of things that are low-hanging fruit that we can actually get in place. And often we're just not aware that they're there. One of the things that came up recently is that people think that because, and this, I used to be one of those people think that because I am living my life, that I know everything that I need to do about it. But we don't. It's like saying that if I have a mind, I know about psychology. I don't. Just because I have a heart, I know about trauma. I don't. Like, I have to learn these things. These things are skills. And so these are skills that I've accrued over the years, and which is why I'm putting this together for you. In terms of the cost, I've obviously broken down the actual the cost of it, but obviously there's price plans. And what I would say is, if there's any other reason why it's you really do still want it, then just DM me and we'll set up a call and we'll see what we can do. But at the moment, you can pay fully or by payment plan. And then the rest of it you can read at your leisure. So I can handle stress on my own without the program, which is something I would actually say, if you can, then great. Me, I couldn't. I needed to get a coach. I needed to get a therapist. I needed to build a program. There was a lot of things that I needed to do to be able to handle the stress in a way that I can handle it now, which I couldn't have done by myself. So if you can, then fine, go for it. And this is not me pushing things onto you. If you can genuinely, then if you feel like you don't need this, then that's okay. But for this is for those who do. And it's often for the people who've tried everything and it has still failed and it still find yourself in this space. Like I said, I'm already working with a coach. What if I don't see results? Seems like too much work. I've tried similar programs. I can find stress management tips online. Um, so let's say I join, what happens next? This is where, like I mentioned, you'll be taken to a page to book your consultation, and then you get a call with me, and then you book your 12 sessions. And you also get access to all the videos which go live on day one. I'm calling it day one. So after this, when we actually lock in your sessions, we have what is called day one, which is the first session that you have with me after that consultation, which is when we actually start to do all the work, right? Awesome. Everyone's been quiet. I'm sure there are questions. It's okay. You can ask the questions. Please do. I'm going to turn on the light because I'm realizing that you can only see my teeth. 1 second. Okay, that's much better. So any questions? This really is the time to ask, right? One of the things that I found for me is that, and I've been in these spaces before where I'm like, oh, do I do this thing? Do I make the jump? Do I make the leap? And what ends up happening is there's the cost of making the decision, right? Which is in this case, for example, it might be financial, it might be time, etc. But like I said, if anything, book a call with me and we'll work it out. But there's also the cost of inaction. And this is the one that I really suffered with. What happens when you don't book that course, when you don't book that program, is you stay exactly where you are. And what I found for me is like the first time I took a program, I needed it, man. Like I needed it. I don't know how better to put it. I needed it. And I was in a situation where I had tried everything. And so I know what that feels like. But do you know what? Once I'd make the decision, a huge weight was lifted off because I knew, okay, cool, I'm taking a step in the right direction and I'm going to get the support I need. And so, again, the reason why I'm only limiting to 8 people tops is because I want to be able to give you that attention, that support. And also because you're one of the founding members in that sense, is if there's anything that you need that isn't involved, then it gives me the opportunity to provide it because this is something I want to develop over time, right? And so only you will be able to get that. So later on down the line, when I relaunch this again, there will be no jigger jagger. I'm going to add and remove and all this kind of stuff. It will be set in stone. So this is an opportunity for you to have a bespoke solution for you. No problem, Elizabeth. Like I said, the link is on screen in the chats right now. And everyone who's in the session, you're going to get an email, which is going to have that as well. But then you're also going to have obviously you get the website itself, which has the 10 reasons and the backgrounds, etc. It's got the relief framework. But there's actually a document I'm going to give you, which is the actual relief framework, which gives basically a little bit more detail. And like I said, you can take that relief framework and you can have results because that's what I started with, right? But then it's for those who need help. You need your hand held through this scenario. You need that extra attention. I'm just aware of time. It is now 8 o'clock. And if there are no more questions, I will close the room. No problem, Kemi. Thanks so much for coming. I appreciate you being here. Awesome to see you as well. I'll see you on LinkedIn again soon, no doubt. Pleasure. Good to see you. Any last questions before I go? If not, I'll close it down in about 10 seconds.
I have a quick question.
Yes, Sayo.
What would you, so during the one-to-one sessions and the group sessions and then community, could you just walk us through like what do we get in each? So is the one-to-ones based on the assessment that we do at the beginning? And then group, is it open discussion? Is it more like teaching? And then community, do we have like weekly topics? Like, could you just talk us through like what the differences are, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one-to-one sessions are directly with me. So this is me and you on a call just like this, where we will take the consultation that we did at the beginning. And in the it's actually worth going back a little bit. So the consultation is where we decide what our benchmark is. Where are you right now? And where do you want to be in terms of stress, right? So we decide what that plan is going to look like. Be clear about how you want to be able to deal with stress and how we're going to get there. So we'll decide together what we need to put in place, right? So I'll put together a development plan with you, and it might talk about strategies. It might give you exercises for you to test things out. If it's boundaries, for example, then there'll actually be like a to-do list. Okay, today I want you to create a boundary. And then next time we speak, it'll be, did you create the boundary? All those kind of things, right? So this is specifically with you, right? And through the 12 weeks, we're going to see progress in terms of that we can always revert back to that consultation day and say, according to the benchmark, how much are we improving? The idea is after week 12, you should be able to handle things so much better than you were at week 1. The group sessions are workshops. So this is where we'll have a topic, or it's going to be split. So they're a bit longer than the one-to-one sessions. So we would start by saying, what are we struggling with? Right? So we would have had the development plans, we would have had the consultations. What are the things that people are struggling with? It would be like a group coaching session, effectively. So you, for example, would say, oh, I'm still struggling with boundaries. I've tried this and it doesn't work. And then I'll open it up to the floor. I will coach you in front of everybody. And then other people themselves will add to that. Oh, I tried this. You should try that. So as a group, we'll go towards the depth of whatever it is that you're still challenged with, right? That's the intention of the group workshop. Sometimes there's going to be something that comes up in that, which is a theme that I may have seen through multiple people's one-to-ones, which I would want to focus on. And so if that is the case, then we'll have a session on that, right? So you'll have the group conversations, the consultations, etc. And then there'll be a section where there'll be one particular element that we'd hone in on. And that will be more like a teaching. I'll give you a framework. I'll break down something to you. I'll give you some research to look at, some homework, all that kind of stuff. I actually kind of tend to not give homework per se, because then it just adds to the stress. It'll be more like things to think about, or something to think about in your week. And then in terms of the community, this is literally just a WhatsApp group. So people in there who are experiencing stress and going through their cycles of stress and trying to break out of it. And in that is wisdom, because it's people who've gone through it before. And so it's similar to that group coaching session, but in a WhatsApp group, but it's for a longer period of time. So this is if you don't want to wait for a month before you see the group again, and you just need something quick right now. Okay, I'm experiencing this right now. Let me put a message in the group and see who's there to like hop on a call or to respond to this issue, for example. So it's immediate response really is the benefit of that WhatsApp group. Yeah. And those are the three elements of it, with the consultation at the beginning, which kind of acts as the anchor to it all.
Got you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for the question. Thanks, Mom. I appreciate you always. Any more questions? Final ones before we go. I've tried to keep it close, but I know we've gone almost 10 minutes over. I don't want to keep you much longer. I know we've got families, friends, food to eat, all sorts of things. So if there isn't anything else, I will close this down and have a look at the website, is what I'd say. If there's still any questions, have a look at the website, drop me an email or a message. and we'll talk about it, because what I don't want is for people to be experiencing stress now, have an opportunity to work on it, not take the opportunity, and stay in a position of stress. Because that used to be me. And it was only when I had people really starting to hone in on me, like, no, you're doing too much with that I really had to start to sit back and be like, okay, what are the actual solutions that are going to get me out of this cycle? Because I always find myself here and I'm tired of it. Like, I got to that point where I had to do something. And I don't want that to be your case. So if this is something you're experiencing, please, please, please do message me. And if there's something missing that you're like, oh, this is great, but I also need this, then let me know. You know, it would be a pleasure. So I'm gonna round it up there. I don't see any more questions coming up, so I'm gonna leave it. But just to remind you, the deadline for the early bird discount is 1 p.m. Friday. 1 p.m. Friday. So if you're thinking to yourself about you're not sure, you have until then. 1 p.m. Friday, and then after that, the early bird discount is gone. And then you have another week before the actual program starts. And that is going to be, what's the word? So you have another week before the program starts, and that one is going to be at 2,500. Sorry, that's what I was trying to say. Yeah. So if you want that discount, 1 p.m. Friday. I'm telling you now because I need you to remember that date or time. I don't want you to get there at 2 p.m. and miss it. Just a reminder, it means that if you do it before 1 p.m. Friday, you save yourself £750 versus afterwards when you have to pay the full 2,500. 1 p.m. Friday. Okay. And just finally as well, UK time zone. Yeah, absolutely. UK time zone. Thanks for the clear up there. UK time zone. So I'm not sure where everyone is calling in from, but that is UK time zone. So if you're East Coast, for example, is going to be of America, it's going to be more like late, like mid-morning, right? If you're in Asia somewhere, then it's going to be late afternoon. All right. I'm going to close this down now. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you got something valuable today. Remember, 5 whys and the relief framework. You'll get all this in your emails with another opportunity for me to remind you about this offer, etc. And if there's anyone else that you think that will find this valuable, I would encourage you to share this with them and let me know who they are, so that if they book because of you, you get that 20% discount. Yeah. So you're welcome. You're welcome, Ayo, anytime. Okay. But I'll remind you of all of that in the email that you get. Whatever you're up to this evening or morning, afternoon, or night, wherever it is, thank you for your time. And thank you for investing your time into your own recovery. I hope I am able to, I get the privilege of working with you in the future and getting to the stage where you can look back on this time and be like, wow, remember that time where I couldn't deal with stress? Gone are those days. I can't wait to get you to that space where it becomes a past tense thought. All right. Have a great night, whatever you're up to. And look out for the email. It's probably going to be sometime tomorrow. Have a great night. Bye, everyone. I'm closing it down in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Thank you, Latoya. 3, 2, 1. Good night.